So we said that the most important part of a subject is the noun. The most important part of a predicate is the verb. And in our order of events of units of grammatical organization, the largest grammatical unit of organization is a sentence. Una oración, a sentence. And a sentence, within a single sentence, we could have many clauses, right? We could have, a sentence can be one clause, ¿verdad? It could be composed of one single clause that has a subject and a predicate, or a sentence could have more than one clause. So it could be a coordinated clause, or a sentence that has multiple clauses joined by a comma or a coordinator word. And what are coordinator words? And, or but, okay? So inside a sentence, we can have one clause or we can have more than one clause. And inside of a clause, we have a subject and a predicate, right? And also inside of a subject and the predicate, we can have phrases. And inside of phrases, we have words, all right? And I'll continue the order of events so hopefully you're able to learn from them. So sentence comes first, then clause, then phrase, then words. That's the order of units of grammatical organization, okay? The largest sentence, clause, phrase, words. All right. Continue sharing presentation. So we said that, the same way we can have elementary clauses composed of a single subject and a single predicate word. So things change, that's a very basic clause composed of your subject and your predicate. Kim left, super basic clause. Kim is your subject, left is your predicate. But we could also complicate these sentences by adding more words or dependents that are modifying or giving information about our subject and our predicate. So we can say Stephanie's sister Kim, and that's your subject, left the party early is your predicate. And we used the example of my uncle saw the doctor. And we spoke about the form of a clause that often the subject and the predicate consist of more than one word. So it's not that, it's just Kim left, but that often we can complicate our subject and complicate our predicate even more to have multiple words, right? So we could say all things instead of things. All things change. And instead of people complained, we can say some people complained about it. And you would still be talking about a subject and a predicate component, and ultimately it would still be one clause. So we also said that inside of a clause, we could have many phrases. So a single clause could have a noun phrase. It could also have a verb phrase, but we'll talk about that soon. So expressions such as all things and some people are called noun phrases. Why are they called noun phrases? Because the most important component of those words, or of those combination of words, all things and some people, the most important component that's meaningful is the noun, things, people, okay? So they're called phrases because they're grammatically alike. They're all modifying the same word. And in this case, that word that's these other words are modifying, some and all, is a noun. So that's a noun phrase. Remember that phrases are smaller units of grammatical organization, so they're smaller than a clause. Phrases often consist of one head element. So as long as you have that head element, la cabeza, you have a phrase, okay? A phrase can be as small as a single word. You don't need to have multiple words. It doesn't need to be all things. If it's just things, pues things and noun phrase, okay? So noun phrases have the noun as the head. So that means that that head or that word predicts, or that word picks out what other words can combine with me or can occur next to me and modify me, the most important component of my own phrase. All right. So by labeling a phrase as a noun phrase, you're saying, or you're specifying, that the head is the noun. The head of that phrase is the noun. Therefore, anything else that occurs next to it is modifying that noun. Okay? So the words that occur alongside the head of the phrase are called dependents, dependiente. That means that they're dependent on the head to communicate meaning. Otherwise, on their own, they couldn't be meaningful. So the head of all things is a phrase, all things, things, right? And all is the dependent. All is also an adjective that's modifying or giving information about a noun. ¿Verdad? It's what's telling us that it's all things. It's not some things, it's all, everything. The head of the phrase is the most important component or element in that phrase because it defines what kind of phrase it is, what kind of phrase we're talking about. So we said we can have noun phrases, but we can also have verb phrases. We can also have adjective phrases, adverb phrases. Virtually, we could have phrases for almost every single part of speech. What are parts of speech? Well, if you don't remember from your previous grammar classes, I'm gonna write it in the chat. Parts of speech, where's my Zoom? Parts of speech are nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, determinatives, determinante, prepositions, coordinators, como and, or, and, but, subordinators, like that and which. So there's 8 different parts of speech: nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, determinatives, prepositions, coordinators, subordinators. 8 parts of speech. And out of those 8 parts of speech that exist in the English language, 6 can have their own phrase. O sea, 6 can occur as the head of their own phrase. And you'll learn more about this in future classes. But basically, almost every single part of speech has its own phrase or can decide what can combine with me. All right? So verb phrases, let me see, are phrases that have the verb as the head or as the most important component. So what is the head of left early? We said in the last class, the head of left early is left, se fue, ¿verdad? Early is the dependent. That's talking about, specifying the time or the manner at which somebody left. Complained about it. What's the head of complained about it? The head of complained about it is complain. It's a verb. About it are the dependents that are talking about the verb. So the dependents are early, the dependents are about it. So defining a phrase. Dictionaries define a phrase as a segment that contains more than one word. However, in our linguistic definition of a phrase, it is important to allow for the possibility of a phrase that consists of solely one word. Okay, so even though we've been talking about phrases that have dependents, dependiente, that doesn't mean that phrases will always have dependents. Phrases can be as small as one word, as long as that one word is the head. So for instance, it was raining. In the sentence, it was raining, it is a noun phrase. Why? Because it has a noun. It doesn't matter if there's nothing else in that noun phrase. It doesn't matter si no hay adjetivo, if there's nothing else and it's only it. It fulfills the function of a noun in a subject position in a sentence. So it is a noun phrase. So in the linguistic definition of what a phrase is, things is a noun phrase. All things is also a noun phrase. So both are noun phrases. Why? Because they both have the most important component, which is the noun. Noun phrases and nouns can occur in other positions besides subject position. So yes, it's typical that whenever we talk about the noun or the sustantivo, we're often talking about the subject. You know, that's usually the case, but it doesn't mean that we'll always be talking about nouns or sustantivo in the subject position, but that we can have nouns also occurring inside of a predicate or elsewhere. All right? So consider the following phrase. We need clients. Okay, we need clients is a sentence. It's also a clause, okay? This clause has a subject. We need clients is the predicate. So we is a noun phrase that occurs in subject position. But we also have another noun phrase inside of the predicate. Clients, cliente, is also a noun phrase because it has a noun, and that noun is the head, and that noun phrase occurs inside of the predicate, okay? And we could also have dependents in that noun phrase. So we could say we need intelligent clients. Intelligent is an adjective that's dependent on clients, which is the head of the noun phrase. And this noun phrase occurs inside of the verb phrase, need clients. All right? So actually phrases can occur inside of phrases. And that's something that you should also be able to understand, that idea that you could have a phrase inside of another phrase. And this is typically the case a lot for, let's say you can have a noun phrase, and inside of that noun phrase, you could have an adjective phrase. Or you could have a verb phrase that looks like the predicate, el predicado, and inside of that verb phrase, you could have a noun phrase. And typically that noun phrase is the object of the verb. So I'm writing these things down in your chat so that you're able to follow. But the idea of a phrase occurring inside of a phrase is something that we're going to explore a little bit more as classes continue. But right now we're just talking about it at a very basic definition level, on a surface level, because we're giving introductory terminologies, ¿verdad? We're still not diving into the nitty gritty of identifying all of the phrases. We're not there yet, okay? So consider the following phrase. Say, yeah, we need clients is, we is a noun phrase, clients is a noun phrase. We need some clients. We is a noun phrase, some clients is a noun phrase. And in this case, you know, clients is the head, clients is also the head here. This is good for clients. This is a noun phrase. Clients is a noun phrase here, okay? This is good for some clients. This is a noun phrase. Some clients is a noun phrase. So we'll return to this idea in the upcoming weeks. So defining a subject and a predicate in an elementary class, when we talk about a subject, we're talking about the actor, the person or the thing that's performing the action, the agent, right? Syntactically, it is easier to detect a subject if you consider the phrases that occur inside it, within. So a subject typically has the form of a noun phrase, typically. Usually when we talk about a subject, it looks like a noun phrase. And its usual position is before a verb at the beginning of the clause or the beginning of the sentence. A predicate in elementary clauses indicates the action that's being completed. Linguistically, it describes a property of the person or thing referred to by the object. So it describes a situation in which this person or thing plays some role, right? And the default position of a predicate is after a subject or following a noun phrase. But even though syntactically these are the positions, usually we say that the subject occurs at the beginning, and usually we say that the predicate or the verb, whatever, occurs at the end. That doesn't mean that this order is always going to happen. That doesn't mean that this will always be the case. When do we have exceptions to this syntactic grammatical order? Well, there are many different exceptions, but let's explore the first exception. The first exception that happens when we talk about the position of a subject and a predicate occurs when we talk about questions or when we talk about interrogatives. So what happens here? Has the clock stopped? Is Kim downstairs? Now I want you to observe and to really look at the subject. We said that the subject typically occurs, or the noun phrase typically occurs in subject position at the beginning of a sentence. But wait a minute, in an interrogative, it's here in the middle. It's not at the beginning, and it follows the verb, okay? Has is a verb, is a verb. And suddenly here we have a sujeto, the subject happens after the verb. Confusing, right? So, did some customers complain? Some customers is a noun phrase and it follows the verb did. If we were to compare these questions to its basic clause counterpart, has the clock stopped? The clock has stopped. That's a basic elementary clause. In a basic sentence, the subject, the clock occurs at the beginning, has stopped is the predicate, follows the subject. Kim is downstairs. So Kim at the beginning is downstairs afterwards. Some customers at the beginning complained afterwards. And that's usually the basic sentence. But in interrogatives, this order is reversed. There's a subject-verb inversion, all right? And there are other cases in which we could also appreciate a type of syntactic play. And we'll be exploring these, especially in week 7, I believe, but not yet. So in interrogatives or questions, nouns are typically placed after a verb, all right? So in the last example, did some customers complain? The interrogative form of complain involves both the use of the verb do and complain. So there are two verbs. Do is a verb, complain is a verb, but do occurs at the beginning of the question. And do is often used as a verb to form questions, okay? All right, so also important to the study of English grammar is defining the difference between what counts as a function word and what is a category. And this is quite tricky, this distinction, so I want you to pay attention. So there are two ways of describing words. We can either describe them as fulfilling a function or function words, or we could talk about them in terms of them being a category or a class of words. So what is a function? When we talk about a function, we're typically referring to the position in which that word occurs in relation to the rest of the sentence or the rest of the clause. So if we say, Pito drank wine, All right, and we're looking at the word pito. What is the function of the word pito? Pito fulfills the function of the subject in relation to the rest of the clause, right? So a function is a relational concept. It refers to the relationship between that word and the rest of the clause. So the function can be a subject, function can be a predicate. Some people complained. When we talk about a subject completing a function, then we talk about it in terms of it being the subject of a clause, the predicate of a clause, and that we're talking about the position and also the syntactic role. So if we're talking about position, we're also talking about the role. Which is my role in a play or my role in the sentence? Am I the actor or am I the event? But when we talk about a category is a different term. Categories refer to a set of words that are grammatically alike. So it refers to a unit of organization or a class of expressions that are grammatically alike. Category doesn't necessarily refer to the position in a sentence of a word. It doesn't give me necessarily information of that position or the role that it's fulfilling. Category is just a set of words that looks like another set of words, perhaps in that sentence as well. So when we talk about, let's give an example, a noun phrase, for instance, we already know that a noun phrase has to have a noun. Noun phrase, si algo un noun phrase, it means it has the noun. And the noun is the most important component. But we could have a noun phrase occurring at the beginning of a sentence in subject position, or we could have a noun phrase occurring at the end in predicate position. So we could have different functions or different positions in a sentence for the same category. So let's see how that looks like. So defining them or the difference between a category and a function can be complicated because there are a lot of similarities. So for instance, usually when we talk about a subject, a function, okay, a subject is a function, often that subject has a noun phrase, which is a category. A single function, example, the subject in a clause, may be filled with different expressions belonging to different categories. So it's not just that that subject needs to have a noun phrase, but that subject could also have a verb phrase inside, and it could also have other words as well. So it's not restricted, the function is not restricted to a single category, okay? So try seeing the difference. So in the left-hand side, you'll see examples for one function with different categories. And in the right-hand side, you'll see examples for one category, but different functions. So one function, different categories. So here we're exploring subject as a function. So his guilt was obvious. That he was guilty was obvious. So both his guilt and that he was guilty are subjects in a larger sentence. They're both fulfilling the subject role. Now, even though they're both fulfilling the subject role and was obvious is the predicate, the packaging inside of it, or the words that are inside of this function are different, right? So in the first example, the packaging for the subject is his guilt. His guilt is a noun phrase. In the second example, the packaging of the subject is a noun phrase. Tiene he is a noun phrase. Was guilty is a verb phrase. And it has that. That is called a subordinator word. So there are three different grammatical categories inside of the second function. So even though it's the same function, a subject, it has different categories. So one function can have different categories. And one category or the same category could have different functions. So we could be talking about the same kind of phrase. We could be talking about a verb phrase, or we could be talking about a noun phrase, but the position of it in a sentence could be different. So we could have some customers complained. In the first example, some customers occurs as the subject of the sentence. But in the second example, Kim insulted some customers. Some customers is no longer the subject, but some customers is now the object inside of the predicate. So now it occurs inside of the verb phrase, all right? So even though it's a noun phrase, its function or its position inside of a sentence is different. So both expressions on the left-hand side function as a subject, as I said. They have the same position in relation to the rest of the clause. Was obvious. But his guilt is a noun phrase category, and that he was guilty is not just a noun phrase, but it's another clause, okay? He was guilty. It's un clause. It has a subject and a predicate. That subject has a noun phrase, he was guilty, is a predicate that has a verb phrase, was guilty, and the head is was of the verb phrase. So we have different categories inside of the same function. In the right-hand side, both are noun phrases, category. Some customers are noun phrases, but the first sentence, the noun phrase has the function of the subject. So it's the subject of a sentence. In the second, some customers fulfills the function of an object inside of a predicate. All right, so let's test your knowledge. So complete the following questions. A term used in some models of grammar to refer to a unit of grammatical organization. Okay, what is a unit of grammatical organization? Is it A, a phrase, B, a function, C, a predicate, or D, a clause? Look at the first exercise. So we're talking about a unit of grammatical organization. Clause is not a unit of grammatical organization. It's the largest, but it has a predicate and a subject. What we're really talking about here is a phrase, a class of expressions grammatically alike, and it's a unit of grammatical organization. So it's phrase, A. The first one is A. A clause is composed of, que tiene una cláusula, a clause. That one's easy. A clause has a subject and a predicate. The most important component of a predicate clause is what's the most important component de un predicado, of a predicate? Verb, exacto. Expressions such as all things and some people are called A, subject, B, phrase, C, noun phrase, D, object. Expressions, all things, some people. C, noun phrase, muy bien. Words that occur alongside the head of a phrase are known as A, words, B, complements, Sí, dependence. Muy bien. Sí is dependent. Now, true or false? Phrases are smaller than a clause. Is that true or false? Phrases are smaller than a clause. True. Muy bien. Clauses have a head. Do clauses have a head? Can a clause have a head? No, a clause cannot have a head. False. Muy bien. Noun phrases can only occur in the subject clause. Is that true or is that false? Do we only get exacto? So noun phrases can occur in the subject clause and they can occur in the predicate clause. A category is a relational concept. It tells you the difference between it and the rest of the clause. Is a category a relational concept? Yes or no? Is a category a relational concept? Does it tell you about that word in relation to the rest of the sentence? Is false. A function is a relational concept. Es la función. So if this one is false, then the following, well, you know the answer for the following. A function is a class of expressions grammatically alike. False. That one is category. So a category is a class of expressions that is grammatically alike that can occur in different places in a sentence. And a function is the relational concept that tells you, the position of that word in relation to the rest. So that's it for today. So I'm going to be uploading this video to YouTube and you will receive a link. Also for Friday, one moment, please. I'm going to create a window on your e-courses for you to do this really simple true or false exercise from last week. Really simple. So just look through the videos to do that one. I've just written it in the chat. And on top of that information that I want you to give me, I also want you to write your name, place where you are from in Puerto Rico, your major, concentration, what are you like studying, and your favorite movie. So you will be receiving an email today that's gonna that's gonna let you know when this exercise is available on e-courses. And I want you to do that by Friday, 12 p.m. It's really simple. Like, come on, okay, you could do that in 5 minutes. So it's really easy stuff, okay? So do the true or false exercise that I have in the chat. That's really easy. And also give me that information about yourself. And that's for Friday. And I will be uploading that exercise on your e-courses, okay? All right, so if there are no further questions, you are free to go and live your Wednesday, okay? Bye-bye.